Changes to construct noun vowels. In the previous module, we dealt with the changes to the endings of the construct, and now we're dealing in this module with the changes to the vowels of the construct. Remember, the absolute doesn't change. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 6 changes, but they're not all of equal importance, so at the end I'll summarize it and it'll be simpler than the rest of it that I go through here. But I do want to cover it for you. So let's look at the first one. The first 2 are really the most important. The first one is that the kametz changes to a patach, so long A becomes a short A, if it is at the end and it's a closed syllable. So we have a construct. Here's our construct, here's our absolute, and again we're only dealing with the construct, so nothing that changes. So what we're talking about here is if we have a closed syllable, CVC, at the end, and there's a kametz in it, it's going to go to a patach. Okay? Here's an example. Yad means hand. When you go and put it in construct, Yad Adonai, the hand of the Lord, then it becomes the patach, the kametz becomes a patach. It reduces, shortens. Okay? So, that is in the final closed syllable. And in this case here we have only one syllable, so it is the final closed syllable. Second point. Now this point is similar to propretonic reduction, which we dealt with before. If you remember, if you forget, you can go back and look at that. If you have a tsere, or a kametz or a tsere, just like in propretonic reduction, if you have a kametz or a tsere in an open syllable or an unstressed syllable, then it will reduce to a shiva. Now, if you remember propretonic reduction, what it was is if we had a noun and we added something like im onto it, so the masculine plural ending, if we had 2 syllables here, this would become propretonic. This was the tonic syllable, this was pretonic, this is propretonic. If in this position we had kametz or tsere, it would reduce to a shiva. Okay? That was propretonic reduction we dealt with before. What we're saying here is that if we have the same vowels, either a kametz or a tsere, in any unstressed syllable, even pretonic, as long as it's unstressed in your construct, so here's your construct, here's your absolute, anywhere in here, then it'll reduce to a shiva. At least that's how the rule goes. An example of that is this. Navi, so prophet. If you want to say the prophet of the Lord, then it's Navi Adonai. Navi becomes Navi because we have a kametz in an unstressed syllable, so it's not the end, that's the one that's stressed, and it's going to reduce to a shiva. So a tsere here would do that as well. Now the way to remember these 2 rules, because these are the most important ones, is to think about this example, because this example has both rules are happening here. So if you have davar, which means word, you have a kametz in both. If you put it in construct, you get davar Adonai. Davar becomes davar. So our kametz in the final closed syllable is shortening, the long A is shortening to a patach. That's rule 1. Rule 2 is that a kametz or a tsere in any other unstressed syllable becomes a shiva. So if you can remember this example right here, davar becomes davar Adonai, both of them change here. The last one, the final one here, goes to a patach, and the other one goes to a shiva. Then you have the first 2 rules done, and those are the most important ones. Now rule 3 are diphthongs. We already dealt with diphthongs. Remember mavet and bayit? Well, let's look at the example. There's nothing new with this example. Mavet means death, and if you put it in construct, you get mot hamelech. So death versus the death of the king. Now, what we said back in our module on diphthongs is that it's when you lose the stress on the diphthong that it changes. So this was the one, remember we had 2. Kametz vav becomes o. And what happens is you lose this what was it, the anatyptic vowel, this disconnecting vowel? I'm not quite sure what we called it anymore, but that drops because it's no longer needed. The other example was bayit becoming beit hanavi, house versus the house of the prophet. So here you had I becoming A when you lose the stress. And the reason you lose the stress in the construct, because the stress moves over here. This is all treated as one unit. Now for me, I have a harder time remembering things in abstraction like this, so I just remember these two examples. Bayit becomes bait, and going back here, mavit becomes moat. If you remember those, then you'll have the diphthongs down. But again, this is not something new. We've already covered this. This is just the same thing happening now in the construct, because the construct involves a shift of stress. Okay, so mavit and bayit. Rule of Shiva, this is, again, just so you know what's going on. What happens is sometimes when you get these vowel changes, you end up with a situation where the rule of Shiva applies. Remember we had rule of Shiva said that if you have two vocal Shivas at the beginning of a word, then you'll get this effect. First one will change to Hidik and the second one will be silent. And you had a corresponding rule for the compound Shivas. That's all that's happening here. So if you have devarim, meaning words in the plural, if you put that in construct, after a couple of steps here, and I haven't indicated all the steps, but it doesn't really matter, you end up with divrei. Devarim becomes divrei. You may wonder, if you didn't know about this rule of Shiva applying, you may wonder, why is there Hidik there? Where'd that come from? Well, what's happening here is in one of the intermediate steps, you end up with two Shivas at the beginning, and then because you have two Shivas, the rule of Shiva applies, and this becomes a Hidik, and this becomes silent Shiva. So Devarim becomes Divrei, Anashim would become Anshe. You can almost get a sense for verbally, if you just, or orally, if you just say it. Just be aware of it. Okay. 6. I think this is my last one. Nope. I got one more after this. This is 5. Segolets. Remember what segolets are? Like melech? What happens with segolets, best to look at an example here. Melech is a segolet. So melachim is the plural. This is the singular. This is the plural. Remember, segolets have either two segols, or if they have a guttural, then they have two pataks, or at least one patak, and generally stress in the first syllable. Anyway, melachim is the plural. If you put it into the construct, the plural construct, remember, singular construct, masculine singular construct has no construct form. Sorry. In the masculine singular, the absolute and the construct are the same. That's our table. So this one's the same. It's the feminine and the plural, feminine singular, masculine plural that change, and the dual is the same as the plural. So in the plural, melachim becomes malke. Now what you'll have here is you have a short vowel, but you don't know which one. And the reason is because the segolets in their base form, there are actually there are different types of segolets, and in their base form they've all amalgamated into one basic form. So you've lost your distinction between the different types of segolets, but in certain forms, like the plural construct, those original vowels show up again. So the only way to know these is to look them up in a dictionary. But for reading, it's not a big deal. You'll see it, malche, and it'll probably be pretty clear. It doesn't look that different from melech anyway. The last one is a small point. You can have a makef. A makef can connect the construct. If that's your construct and this is your absolute, sometimes you have a makef between them. So it connects it even more strongly. An example of that would be bein, son. In construct, it tends to be ben with the makef and then the absolute. So that's not uncommon, just so you're aware that that happens. Okay, that was 6 things. Let me summarize this for you. Summary. Number 1, I would memorize this. Devar Adonai. If you know that that comes from davar, so 2 comets, they both change. This is rule 1, this is rule 2. Okay? Memorize that one, that example, and you'll cover both rules. Know your diphthongs. okay, I would just learn mavet. Mavet becomes mot, bait becomes bait. You already know that from the past, hopefully. Makef, don't be surprised if a makef joins the two. And that should just help you, really. It joins them even stronger than if there isn't. And use your dictionary. Sometimes you just have to look it up. You won't know what the form is. So, constructs can change in the endings. We dealt with that last module, and in the vowels. That's what we're dealing with in this module. And the absolute form does not change. It is absolutely static.